Yeah! Nothing, not nothing is better than watching Rambo blow up a bad guy. Boom. Welcome to Movies Revisited. I'm your host, Taylor James Johnson, and today we are going to be talking about Rambo First Blood Part 2. The first Rambo was a very interesting dramatic character study that had something to say about, the mental state of our veterans coming home. And this sequel, they're like, you know what? F it, let's just make an action movie. So they took this character from a dramatic film and threw him into 80s action galore, and boy, howdy, is it glorious. Even Ronald Reagan himself praised Rambo because of politics. So yeah, let's see what the great John Fallon has to say about Rambo First Blood Part 2. I watched this movie like every day when I was a child. Probably shouldn't have, though.
I swear to God, I didn't know it was supposed to happen like this. It was just supposed to be another assignment. Mission accomplished.
Flashback to the early 80s, and Sylvester Stallone was having a bit of a rocky patch, no pun intended. While Rocky and Rocky II had been huge hits in the 70s, the decade didn't start out all that strongly for Stallone. He had a soccer movie called Victory, which didn't do particularly well, and then the really underrated cop movie Nighthawks, which, despite some actually positive reviews, didn't do very well at the box office. But in 1982, he had the comeback of all comebacks when Rocky III and First Blood came out and were both blockbuster successes.
Did you First Blood?
Stallone's career was on fire, but then he hit two what one might call speed bumps. He directed the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, Staying Alive, in 1983, and it was not a critical success. Now, the film did relatively well at the box office, I think a lot better than most people remember. It wasn't anywhere near as big of a hit as the original film, but hey, it made $127 million worldwide, which is pretty huge, right? It actually had one of the biggest opening weekends of all time, and it made $65 million at the US box office. That's pretty impressive for 1983. It also had a pretty big hit song, Far From Over, which was performed by Stallone's own brother, Frank Stallone, and it made it pretty high on the Billboard charts, all the way to number 10. But as I said, it was not a critical success, and I don't think audiences particularly caught into it either. The next year would prove to be kind of disastrous for Stallone. He turned down both Beverly Hills Cop and Romancing the Stone to do Rhinestone, opposite Dolly Parton. Yes, a country singing musical. Now that one tanked. That was not a hit. Although, it's not that bad, to be honest. So what's a man on a mission to conquer Hollywood to do? Get back to what connected with his audience before. That's what. Now, Rocky had already had 3 follow-up films, but John Rambo, who, at Stallone's insistence, thankfully was not killed off at the end of First Blood, was due for another war party. Nobody could have anticipated the impact Rambo First Blood Part 2 would have on audiences around the world and 80s pop culture in general, with it even being name-checked by then-President Reagan. So let's face it, the one-man army action subgenre, which Arnold Schwarzenegger went on to quasi-spoof with Commando, was created by Sylvester Stallone. Don't believe me? Check this out. Commando director Mark L. Lester admitted in a 2012 Empire magazine interview that he saw Rambo 2 and changed the last act of Commando to try and rival what Stallone had pulled off. I rest my case. I mean, it invented the genre. So Rambo 2 followed up where First Blood left off. Incarcerated for his previous crimes, he did what he had to do, really. John Rambo was sprung out of jail by his old colonel and mentor, once again played by the late and great Richard Crenna, for a special covert mission in Vietnam.
Your name was dug out by the computer as one of 3 most able to complete the mission.
His task? search for missing American POWs, and it found Take Pictures.
Photographs?
Just photographs. Under no circumstances are you to engage the enemy.
I'm supposed to leave him there?
Sure. Yeah. You sent in the right guy. Send Rambo in to take pictures and, not kill any guys. I mean, yeah, that's gonna happen. This is Rambo we're talking about, not Mr. Rogers. POWs are of course found, and with his sharpened hunting knife, his bow, explosive arrows, and a truckload of muscle oil, Rambo mows down most of the country on his own. Alongside Stallone, the film also starred Steven Berkoff as the cruel yet kinda charming Colonel Podolsky, which Dolph Lundgren was up for apparently until Stallone realized he was the same dude auditioning for Rocky IV, and he couldn't have Lundgren play the bad guy in both of his movies in 1985, right?
I must break you.
Hot to trot Julian Nixon was put in her first role. She was a model who was discovered in Honolulu, Hawaii. Steve Williams is in it in his only film credit. He's the dude with the blonde hair and the sunglasses that you just kind of hate when you take a look at him right away.
Don't be a hero.
Then, of course, there's Martin Kove from The Karate Kid and, of course, Cobra Kai as Erickson. And Martin Kove actually did his own kind of Rambo knockoff a couple years later called Steel Justice, which is kind of a fun, if dumb, 80s action flick. And then there's the always awesome Charles Napier as the ultimate slimeball, Murdoch, who was originally going to be played by Lee Marvin of all people until he had a change of heart. I guess he didn't want to play a scumbag. Murdoch.
I'm coming to get you.
Classic. Now, the original title for the film was actually First Blood 2: The Mission, and the first draft of the script was written by none other than that mad genius behind Aliens and The Terminator, James Cameron. Cameron's script had the same basic structure as the finished film, but in Cameron's version, Rambo was a patient in a mental hospital, and he was eventually tagged with a comic relief sidekick for the mission. And the latter was actually to be played by John Travolta, because remember, Travolta was all muscled, oiled up, and greasy, and sweaty, and strong, and muscular after staying alive. Stallone had kind of transformed his body to kind of turn him into a Stallone-esque hero. It didn't really take, though, and it didn't work out in the end. But Stallone eventually ended up rewriting the script, starting with the title. He wanted the series to be named after the character, just like his Rocky movies. So First Blood Part 2: The Mission became Rambo, First Blood Part 2. Ah yes, Rambo. It's funny, I always think of First Blood as just Rambo, even though it's actually called First Blood. He changed the mental ward, which Cameron wound up using in Terminator 2.
Come with me if you want to live.
And thankfully, he elbow dropped the comic relief sidekick out of there. Funnily enough, Troutman would become the wisecracking buddy in Rambo 3, one of that sequel's biggest flaws in my useless opinion, but that's for another episode.
I understand.
When the smoke cleared, Cameron pretty much disowned the final script, saying, "I only wrote the action, Stallone wrote the politics." On his end, Stallone had this to say to Ain't It Cool News about Cameron's draft. "I thought the politics were important, such as a right-wing stance coming from Troutman and his nemesis Murdoch, contrasted with Rambo's obvious neutrality, which I believe is explained in Rambo's final speech."
I want what they want, and every other guy who came over here and spilt his guts and gave everything he had once for our country to love us as much as we love it.
Also, in his original draft, it took nearly 30 to 40 pages to have any action initiated, and Rambo was partnered with a techie sidekick. So it was more than just the politics that were cut out of the script. There was actually a simple storyline that was going. In a rare move, author Dave Morrell, who penned the First Blood novel on which the original film was based, wound up writing the novelization for First Blood Part 2. Kinda crazy, isn't it? And it's largely based on Cameron's unedited script. Morrell said, "In the end, my novelization was 1/3 original material for me, 1/3 adaptation of James Cameron, and 1/3 the final script. A copy of that book could be worth a mint today, so eBay, here I come." And there you have it. The script was done and dusted, and it was go time. One element from the finished film that stood out was Stallone's crazy bod, which he achieved via 8 months of intense training, 4 hours a day. SWAT combat courses, archery courses, survivalist courses, the works. Stallone went all out, and man does it ever show. I'd argue that this is kind of the first movie that really displays his insane action hero body. But then again, he's not exactly wimpy in Rocky 3 either though, is he? I mean, he looks sane in this movie though. The cast and crew were actually floored by Sly's work ethics, with co-star Richard Crenna saying, "You can't imagine what he put himself through. We'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and he would go and work out. Heavy weights, free weights, with all kinds of exercises. We'd finish the day's work, a very hard day's work, and he'd be back in the gym again to work out again." Kind of like that sound. Sounds like Trotman, right? Explaining Rambo. This, you wouldn't believe what he did. And I have to say, all that hard work paid off. Stallone, in the end, looked fantastic. A freaking Adonis, if one might say.
Let me just say that Rambo is the best combat vet I've ever seen. A pure fighting machine with only a desire to win a war that someone else lost.
The film went into production under the helm of director George P. Cosmatos, who reunited with Sly in 1986 for Cobra. However, it has since been heavily suggested by Kurt Russell that Stallone pretty much ghost-directed the picture. I don't know, I wasn't there. When screenwriter Kevin Jarre was fired as the director of Tombstone, Russell was looking for a director that would let him direct the film without putting his name on it. And he asked Sly if he knew anybody like that, and Stallone actually recommended Cosmatos because this was, as Russell says, the deal they apparently had on Rambo 2. Allow me to let Russell clarify. They wanted me to take over the movie, Tombstone. And I said I'll do it, but I don't want my name on it. I go to George's room, give him the shot list for the next day. That was the deal. I got him from Sly Stallone. Sly did the same thing with Rambo 2 with George, and I said to George, "While you're alive, George, I won't say a goddamn thing." Now, Stallone himself never confirmed this, so who's to say if it's true or not? I'm also wondering what this revealed if Sly himself actually ghost-directed Cobra. I don't know. It does seem very Stallone-esque, doesn't it? So Rambo 2 entered production in 1984 and was shot mostly in Mexico with some second unit in Thailand. Stallone put himself through hell for the stunt-heavy picture, doing most of his own stunts as usual. Although he came out of it unscathed, an explosion that went off ahead of time killed special effects consultant Cliff Wenger Jr. Another production woe was that Hurricane Odile was hitting the region where they were shooting hard and destroying the sets. Thankfully, nobody was harmed during that shit show. The finished film was a technical marvel and then some. Rambo 2 took action, set pieces, violence, and explosions to the next level for 1985. The more this movie forged forward, the more ambitious the mayhem became. This movie showcased astounding jungle scenery, carnage galore, and a gripping montage of Rambo killing all kinds of soldiers in novel ways that shamed Jason Voorhees, plus an astounding helicopter western-esque standoff with M16 party favors up the wazoo. Basically, the freaking fireworks of all, played out to Jerry Goldsmith's pulse-pounding score. Oh, and let's not forget about the uber-patriotic end credit song, "Peace in Our Life."
We'll never fall. The strength of our nation belongs to us all.
Which is performed by Frank Stallone, of course. Always Frank Stallone. And you know what? Call me a jerk, but it's a pretty good song, right? Now, upon its release, critics panned the film and it eventually got Worst Picture, Worst Screenplay, Worst Original Song, and Worst Actor for Stallone at the 1985 Golden Raspberry Awards. But you know what? All that doesn't really matter. The magic was done, audiences loved it. I even heard that it was shown to Vietnam vets and they cheered madly. The film was cathartic for them, and I could totally understand why. Now, Rambo 2's immense success spawned countless imitators, with Missing in Action even hitting theaters before Rambo 2 came out, because apparently it was loosely based on the Cameron script that was already floating around at the time. It was the most financially viable entry in the franchise so far, and when Ronald Reagan, the US president at the time, starts quoting a movie character when he said, "Boy, after seeing Rambo last night, I know what to do the next time this happens," you know that the cultural impact was immense. The flick was loud, brash, and improbable, but totally fun as hell. Dirty Harry was the iconic male figure of the 70s, and Rambo 2 made John Rambo the staple of the 1980s. The movie was insanely popular. In fact, it was the number 2 highest grossing movie of 1985. You know what number 1 was? Back to the Future. So Rambo 2 made almost as much money as Back to the Future. I mean, isn't that insane? Made over $300 million worldwide. Crazy. You know what number 3 happened to be that year, kids? Rocky 4, the movie we're going to talk about on our next episode. So I don't think any actor ended 1985 as big of a star as Sylvester Stallone was. The character was so popular, it even spawned a cartoon called Rambo: The Force of Freedom, plus countless video games and a toy line. I actually had a couple of these toys. Just like that, Rambo became a cinematic icon, and of course he was referenced in Gremlins 2 in 1990, Lampoon in Hot Shots Part 2 in 1993, and the list would just be too long. Not everybody loves the Rambo movies though, but everybody on Earth knows who Rambo is. So enough said. You can dislike the Rambo movies if you want, but you know who he is. Watching the film again today in 2021, the way I see it, Rambo 2 was my generation's Hercules or Tarzan. The aim for relative realism that First Blood had adopted was dropped in favor of wham-bang, borderline comic bookish vibe that went all out, and I mean all fucking out. Here, John Rambo was turned into a bigger-than-life, classic mythological type figure. The hero is muscled beyond belief, is always shirtless, lives in a man's world where any woman that enters it unfortunately doesn't last very long. He knows no fear, has no equal, and is defined by his actions as opposed to his words. Personally, if I had to pick one movie to bring with me to a deserted island, it would be Rambo 2. The film is an outstanding achievement that delivers the goods every time I see it. It's kind of a masterpiece. I give it 10 Stallones on 10 Stallones.
You know there's more men out there. You know where they are. Find them.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. Joe Blow was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.